Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is haunt, and this verb was suggested by the viewer Artem. Thank you so much for sharing a great idea. Now let's begin to look at some of the definitions or the ways that we use this verb. The first way you might encounter the verb haunt is in connection to a ghost. So you might think of this as a spirit, a phantom, but usually it's thought to be a person who was once alive but is now dead, but is sort of manifesting uh, even in that dead state. I hope that isn't too confusing of an explanation, but the way you might hear it used is to describe the actions of ghosts. So to sort of manifest or be itself in a particular place at a rather regular interval or a regular set of times. Sometimes you'll hear of legends or tales of a particular person haunting their former home, right? That would be kind of a regular place, or maybe it's a particular area outdoors. You might hear that with graveyards as another example. Now, maybe a less frightening way to use that verb is our second one, and it can just mean to frequent a place, so to regularly visit. A third way you might encounter the verb haunt means to be persistently in the mind of someone. So many times this is used in connection to a negative event, something traumatic. But it's that idea that that traumatic thing stays with someone. It's always present in their mind, and it may affect their ability to think about other things, do other things. Also related to that, the fourth definition here, to be persistently and disturbingly present in something. So again, it's kind of that continued presence of someone or something. For now, you should know that haunt is a regular verb. If you want to make the progressive form of this verb, all you need to do is add ing, that forms haunting. The past tense and the participle forms of our verb can be made by adding ed. Now the base verb haunt ends with a T sound. This means the ed ending is going to make an id sound, and you're going to add an extra syllable to the verb when you say it. So the past tense and the participle forms of the verb should sound like this: haunted, haunted. Okay. Now, you might be happy to know no additional phrasal verbs that we need to study today, so we can move on to some example sentences. I thought we would do a little practice with the past progressive and the simple present today. Let's start with the past progressive. We use this verb tense to talk about an action that was ongoing in the past. Now, some teachers and textbooks will call this the past continuous, and that's just fine. It means the same thing. It's fairly common to see this verb tense used in conjunction with the simple past tense. So many times what people are describing is one action that was ongoing or continuing, and then another action interrupts it. That interrupting action is the one that is in the simple past tense. So the reason I like saying past progressive is the two-letter P's can help you remember you need two parts to make your verb. In this verb tense, we'll be using the past tense form of be, and there are two forms of it, so we have to pay attention to our subject. If our subject is I, he, she, or it, we're going to use was and then the ing form the verb. But if our subject is you, we, or they, we'll use were, W-E-R-E, and then the ing form the verb. Let's take a look at an example sentence. The ghost was haunting the mansion for years before the young family moved in. There we've got that interrupting action, the action of moving into a particular place. This to me sounds like the start of some type of story or entertaining tale. Okay? And clearly, it goes back to that first definition of our verb. Now, if you want to make a negative past progressive sentence, again, pay attention to your subject. You want to use the proper form of be that matches that subject. Then use not, and then the ing ending of the verb. Now, you might encounter the contraction form. So, was not can become wasn't, were not will become weren't. And you can see that in my example sentence here. These experiences weren't haunting her every day, but they were disrupting her ability to work and study. Okay? So here we're moving to that third definition, right? Regarding some type of feeling, emotion being present in someone. Finally, let's look at making a yes or no question in the past progressive. To do this, you start with the past form of be, whichever form matches your subject. That subject comes next. Then use the ing form of the verb. Here's the last example. Were ghosts haunting the school before this year? Okay. So again, there's that continued or ongoing action that is implied as part of that question. Now let's move on to the simple present. We use this verb tense to talk about our habits and routines. We can also use it to discuss facts, and we'll also see it a bit here with our feelings or emotions. The most difficult thing for people to remember is that we have to pay attention to our subject in the simple present. If the subject is I, you, we, or they, just use the base verb. Okay, we're not going to add any suffixes. But if the subject is he, she, or it, then you want to add an S to the end of this verb. You can see that in my example here. That horror film still haunts me years later. So with this sentence, right, I'm talking about that kind of disturbing feeling that stays with me. It's persistently in my mind, something that kind of makes me, So that would be an example of a factual statement. Now let's take a look at making a negative sentence in the simple present. Again, pay attention to your subject. If your subject is I, you, we, or they, use do not and then the base verb. If the subject is he, she, or it, use does not and then the base verb. Notice I'm not adding an S to the end of the verb in the negative. So an example of this might be, mistakes don't haunt him. Right? So here we're saying they're not persistently in his mind. It's not sort of lingering with him. Finally, let's look at making a yes or no question in the simple present. To do this, start with do or does, then you're going to have your subject, right? And then the base verb. Again, we are not adding an S to the end of the verb. We're only doing that in the affirmative when the subject is he, she, or it. Let's take a look at the last question. Does buyer's remorse haunt you? Right? So kind of that feeling of like, oh, I shouldn't have spent money. Right? Some people really struggle with that. As soon as they make a purchase, they have that sort of feeling of like, oh, I shouldn't have spent the money. Why did I do that? That's not really what I wanted, right? Some type of persistent feeling that's similar to that. Now, let's spend a moment looking at some words that are related to our verb haunt. The first word we're going to discuss today is just the noun form of the word. The noun haunt can, or does, not can, does have the exact same spelling and the exact same pronunciation as our verb. When we use this word as a noun, we're going to go back to that second definition of the verb. Remember visiting a place frequently, right? So the noun haunt can refer to a place that has been frequented by a specific person or maybe a group of people. An example of this. They visited their old haunts on campus when they were back for homecoming. So Homecoming is kind of a tradition at a lot of American colleges and universities. So they're inviting people that formerly attended, people who've graduated, to sort of come back, celebrate. Many times the schools are hoping there will be donations connected to that as well. But they want people to have kind of this warm feeling for where they spent 4 or more years of their lives. So here they're talking about going back to maybe certain areas, certain buildings that they frequented while they were students. Another word you might counter is the adjective haunted. This can have a couple different meanings. One way it is frequently used is to describe a place that is frequented by a ghost, or could be multiple ghosts. So, an example of this: have you ever visited a haunted house? Now, I will note that that particular phrase, haunted house, can have a special meaning. It can be something that is meant to resemble kind of a spooky or eerie place that is filled with many things that could scare people, frighten them, and people will pay to go to these attractions, particularly in the fall here in the United States, to have that kind of thrill of being scared. A second way to use the adjective haunted means having or showing signs of mental anguish or torment. An example of that dog has haunted eyes, right? So this is probably implying like the dog has had some horrible kind of experience, maybe suffered through something, but there's sort of a pained look in that particular animal's eyes. Now, another adjective you might encounter is haunting. When this gets used, we're usually describing something that people find to be poignant, something that they might find to be difficult to forget or maybe difficult to ignore. An example of this: I haven't stopped thinking about that haunting story. Right? So, something that just made a person go kind of, wow, that's unbelievable, or I can't believe that happened. Um, Again, that idea kind of, it stays with you. You might make the connection back to our earlier definitions with the verb, that idea of persistent. One last word for today, it's the adverb hauntingly. Here, we could be describing a verb or another adjective, but we're describing something that is being done in a way that is either beautiful, sad, or frightening, or maybe we're talking about something, again, that cannot be forgotten or ignored. An example of this: this movie is a hauntingly refreshing take on war films. I actually borrowed this sentence from a recent movie review. So someone found a particular film to be different than many war movies, right? There are so many movies about the multitude of wars that have occurred over human history. But this person, again, found this one to be kind of beautiful, maybe told something that was rather new or unique and was not easily forgotten. Thanks again to Arnhem for suggesting today's verb. I thank you all for watching, and I hope you have a great day.